Greetings everyone and welcome to Keeping Up with Papa, Life After Work, where we find out how one man manages to keep himself busy, physically active, and mentally engaged after retirement with projects. Today's project? Well, we're going skinny dippering. Now that may not be quite what you think it is. Check it out. When Welcome back. Hey, apologize for a little bit of background noise. We just had a rainstorm. I am up in the barn and it's a tin roof, and hey, noise comes with a tin roof. That's the way it is. Hey, I hope that first segment kind of caught your interest. Now, this is personally a very important project to me, and one that had its beginning some 12 years ago when a friend of mine, whom I'll call Ted because, well, Ted's his name, Ted had the idea that he might be able to build a very small, lightweight, flats fishing skiff for use in skinny water here around Florida. On the coast of Florida, on each side, we have inshore waters and it gets very shallow. So a skinny boat like this is perfect for that application. Well, I was intrigued, and I've seen Ted's work before with wooden canoes. He's very skilled at it. So I thought, hey, why not? Maybe we'll give it a try. So I agreed to fund the first project and to help as much as possible. So we both agreed, and hey, we were off and running. So this begs the question of how did we get from this, back when the skinny dipper was new, to this 12 years later, and then back to this today? Let's find out. Hey, let me take a moment and explain to you exactly what it is you're seeing here. This is the prototype boat. It's a 14-foot long skiff made entirely out of a product called Divinacell, what you see here. It's actually foam that comes in big sheets. Now, Ted molded that out over an old Carolina creek boat and then glassed it with fiberglass. It's unsinkable, floats in about 2 inches of water without a motor on it, and with the engine tilted, it'll navigate shallow water in the 8-inch range. The boat unrigged, I think it weighs around 160 pounds, and give or take a little bit. Got the casting decks on the front and on the rear, spacious cockpit, 5 storage lockers, the one up to the front being a fully insulated ice chest, and it's got an appropriately sized trolling motor. Now, with the 15 horsepower Honda kicker on the back, it planes up quickly and gets up to about 25 miles per hour with a single person in it. Very comfortable for 2 fishermen, very comfortable for 3 fishermen, 4 you're walking the edge a little bit. And you know, I said it was unsinkable, and you know, it really is. It's completely self-bailing. After it was painted when I first built it, but before I had completely outfitted it, I challenged my grandson and a couple of his buddies to see if they could sink the thing. So hey, we launched it, pulled the plug, they all got inside, and sure enough, with their weight, it dropped down to where there was 4 or 5 inches of water in the boat. But that was it. So they put the plug back in and went and got 5-gallon buckets. Then they filled it all the way up and got inside. Sure enough, well, it sunk down almost to the gunnels, but it never went underwater. They were satisfied, I was satisfied. We pulled the plug, and about 30 minutes later, it had completely self-bailed. Hardly any water left inside of it at all. Wow, that's a really comforting feeling. We actually built 2 of these. A few lessons were learned on the first one, and we applied those to the second boat. The second boat was Ted's personal boat. Now, he added a live well, all right, and he also used a little bit of Kevlar in the boat in order to lighten it up a little bit more. Well, he no longer uses it, so he sold it to me. It's been sitting out in his yard for quite some time. And unfortunately, a tree limb fell on it, and Well, it's going to need a little bit more reconstructive surgery than mine needed. I'll get to it eventually. Now, the original build was a very interesting process, but I'm not going to belabor everyone with that. If you'd like to learn more about it, there's a great article that was written on us by a magazine called Florida Sportsman about 10 years ago. Now, they did a good job of delving into the details, so it's still available online. All you need to do is Google Florida Sportsman backyard skinny dippers. It'll pop right up. Well, the dipper now is about 12 years old. I may say 15 years old later in this, but I looked it up and it's actually around 12. And it's lived a pretty full life. It's gotten a lot of use. So full, in fact, that it was in pretty serious need of a refresh. It had plenty of cuts and dings and holes and cracks. And there was water in the hull, and that really needed to come out. I had decided that once I retired, bringing the skinny dipper back to original form, well, that was going to be one of my priority projects. But, you know, this wasn't just going to be a weekend or two. No, this took about 4 months off and on. And I really didn't want to rush things, so I took my time. I had a lot of stuff I had to learn how to do or relearn how to do because I actually was the one that did the original finishing work on both boats. Now, on the other hand, the way the boat was built and originally finished, at least on paper, that meant that all I really had to do was to do some sanding and a little bit of hull repair and repaint, right? Yeah, right. Step one was to clean it up good. The cleaning process gave me a really good idea of just how much cosmetic and structural damage there was to the hull. There was a lot of cosmetic, a whole lot. But structurally, well, really only one. And that one was a hole in the floor that had been letting water into the hull, I don't know, for several years. That one was going to take a little bit of effort to correct. All right, I've completed vacuuming, and just vacuuming has given me a little bit better idea of what's involved and going to be involved in getting this thing all cleaned up and ready for paint. And just to start off, the engine won't start. It never not starts right up. So that's going to have to be addressed. So the engine will have to come off. Also, the trolling motor will have to come off. Everything comes out. Battery located here in this little battery compartment. It'll come out. There's a well down here, a well over there on the other side. All these hinged covers will come off. And you can see just how dirty this is in there. And you actually see right there that's wet. Now, this shouldn't be wet at all because it's been sitting under the pole barn for a few months. That means I have an issue somewhere in the hull. Most likely it comes from this right here, which is this crack. When this was originally built, there are stringers that run through here. There's no wood in this hull anywhere, but we didn't really brace real well between those stringers, and so stepping down off the deck here resulted in a hole being punched in right there. I have bought material to specifically deal with that next time around. To be fixed, I have stress cracks here, and I believe there's one on the other side over there as well. And then we have a box here, which is actually a wet box or an ice box. It's insulated well, and up here an anchor area. All that is just filthy inside, so it's got to be gotten really, really clean and wiped down good before it gets painted. The hull's in remarkably good condition. I do have one ding right here that we took loading on the trailer years ago. The beauty of it, though, is it didn't punch through to the other side. So really didn't have to worry about it too much until it was time to actually come back here and do what I'm doing now, which is strip the whole thing down, kick it completely apart, fix up all the little dings and holes that we have, and then paint it. So you know how one issue always seems to lead to another. A little bit of Murphy's Law.
you know, pitched in there. Well, Mr. Murphy had been really busy planning in advance of me doing this refurb. So, hey, first issue from Mr. Murphy. You probably can't see it in this video, but these tires are checked really bad. A lot of cracks on the side. So, looks like it's time for new tires. Yeah, I ended up swapping the spare on, but those tires were 12 years old and all three of them were badly checked, even the spare tire. So I ended up just replacing all three. So as a matter of habit, I always check my wheels before I leave. Both wheels looked fine. Went down the road about a mile and I got out before I got on the paved road and checked them again. They still looked fine. 3 miles down the road, I did one more stop to check. I think maybe I might have a bearing issue on this wheel. So, back to the house, taking it apart, run over to the trailer shop and get the right bearings and start all over. I'll do them both at the same time. Got the bearings replaced and I finally got the motor to the shop. Well, I told them just to take their time. I wouldn't need it back for a month or more. Well, naturally, they had it ready in about 2 weeks. Turns out that, as expected, the carb was badly gummed up. And they just couldn't fix it. Normally they can pull one off and just kind of soak it and clean it up. But this one, they said it was not going to work. So they replaced the carb and also did an impeller job for me while they had it out. That was an expensive error on my part. I really should have made sure that I drained those carbs, or that carb, you know, before I said let the thing sit up for a while. It's really not all that hard. You just pull the cover off, you got to take the side cover off, and you just take a screwdriver and open up a little valve and it drains right out. $600 later, I learned I'm not going to do that again. It's been about 3 days now since I moved the boat off of its trailer and onto the second trailer for the other skinny dipper. And so now I moved it just recently, or just a few minutes ago actually, under the pole barn. And as you can see, I am still dripping water out of the hull. It'll be a while before that thing's dried out. It'll be really interesting to see exactly where this water's coming from. Job 1, sanding. I have a pretty decent random orbital sander and I had a whole bunch of 5-inch 100 grit pads left over from a previous job. So we're going to try that and see how far we get. What we have to do is get rid of all these imperfections. Hopefully you can see these on the camera, but these are little bubbles that occurred over the years underneath the paint, which tells you that the guy that painted it the first time didn't do the best job, and that would be me. So all that's got to come off and cleaned up real good. I don't necessarily need to go all the way down to the original fiberglass coating, but I'll get as close as I can within reason to get it smooth. Well, it's working, but yeah, this is going to take a while. All right, so a little less than 20, maybe about 20% of the bottom of the hull is done. You can see a definite line between what I've done and what I haven't done over here. A lot of the pot marking is right there. This is nice and smooth. Got some issues here where it's roughed out still. I have to clean that up. Over here, see where the boat took a hit at some point. Not surprising. We took it out in the ocean and the bays where there's lots of oysters and rocks, and it gets beat up. But again, it survived really well, and that's an easy repair. Okay, I'm about an hour into it. I have 1/2 of the hull done. That's it. Down to the back end. However, I will say that it looks pretty smooth. Might have to do a lot of hand sanding in areas like this. I simply cannot get into it. I can see it better over here. These blisters are the biggest problem. Without the blisters, everything else just comes down nice and smooth really easily, but I've got to pretty much take every one of those blisters down to bare fiberglass, or they'll show up in the paint job. So the bottom is completely sanded off really nicely. I'll show you a good shot of that when I do a walk around the entire thing after it's finished. But in the meantime, I need to figure out how I'm going to get these stickers off of here. Now, I can't just scrape them off. They don't really come easily. But what typically works well is a heat gun. Now, I tried some on the numbers and letters up front. Worked perfect. I haven't tried it on this sticker yet. Let's see what happens. Now, all the heat gun's really going to do is loosen it up and soften up the adhesive. Should allow me to scrape it off. Yep. I'm going to need to be a little bit more delicate, but that's actually working. I gouged the paint here in one spot. That's fine. I'll end up taking most of that paint off anyway. Here we go. That would be a mess to try and get off with the sander. This way it's just leaving a little bit of adhesive. It'll all come right off. Makes a big difference using the heat gun. Hey, I don't know about you, but I'm really curious as to whether or not this is going to gunk up the sandpaper real bad, because there is adhesive residue left on here. So I got an old sanding piece on here. Let's see how it turns out. Excellent. Took it right off. No gunk on the sandpaper, so I'll be able to cut right through this, no problem. Hey, if you're like me, you're probably kind of curious about these blisters in the paint. Well, what I've figured out is that these blisters are all below the water line. Here's where the water line would be when the boat was sitting on the beach, and then down here, of course, we're looking down towards the actual top of the boat. There are no blisters. We swing over here. These are after I've sanded this side, and you can see the same thing. So what's happened is we've had water get up under the paint at some point, because it does tend to just sit on the beach in the water, gets kind of full of water, and then this becomes the water line while it's sitting there at an angle down on the beach. So not entirely sure if there's anything I can do about that outside of using bottom paint over the entire boat. And I don't really want to use bottom paint. It's it's much more expensive for one, and it's thick, and I don't like the looks of it, to be honest with you. So maybe what I'll just do is put up with this, and we'll have it again in 10 years. I'll have to sand it and repaint it. All right, sanding on the bottom is done all the way around. As mentioned previously, I have some divots here and there, and I've blown those out really well. Got all the blisters off. All that looks really good. Have a big divot here. Mentioned previously, that cleaned up well, and we'll glass the inside of that and then put some fiberglass cloth over it. A few little cracks and divots like that type of stuff. The front end here where the you hooked that up to the boat trailer, that's taken a beating over the years. A little bit of cleanup will occur there. And, a few more divots that need to be touched up. But all in all, not too bad. Looks quite reasonable. So I'll have some fiberglass work this afternoon, probably sand it, then hit it again tomorrow. And then I can figure out how I'm going to paint the bottom. Well, it's day 3 of filler. Every time I go and fill something, I find some new void that I missed before, so I dig that out a little bit and fill that. I am also filling some areas like back here where the motor mounted and getting those back up to level. And you can see here that, as an example, that I've actually got 2 coats on that, and it still is a divot there, as are these down here. So probably one more and I'll have that pretty much smoothed out. My big hole over here on the side is turning out really nice. Little tiny bit of a depression there. I think I'll put one more coat on it, smooth it out, and then sand it. One thing that I did learn, and I always manage to do this every time I do something, is I screw it up once or twice until I figure out how to do it. In this case, that's mixing this filler material. And this last time I didn't put enough activator in it, and it ended up being, it didn't cure completely in 24 hours, so I had to get a lot of that off when it was really putty form still. And that doesn't work well with sanding. This big divot on the front end here is mostly gone. I think I'll do one more of those. I'm not really out to make this completely flawlessly perfect. I just want to make it, get some strength back into it again. And I think this is going to work out really, really well. This should kind of demonstrate what I did wrong yesterday on the mixing. You can see the color over here is a deep blue. Now, after I've thoroughly stirred this for about 1.5 minutes, it's gone to more of a turquoise color. And I think that means that the activator's all mixed in completely, so that's good news.
Guess what? It's time to paint. Well, it's almost time to paint. Now, the boat has been completely sanded. All my little divots and holes and bumps and such have been fixed using a polyester structural repair putty that's all filled with glass fibers. Dries nice and hard. Well, I think it's going to do an excellent job. Before we go to the next step, we need to clean the boat up really well. So yesterday evening, it went over and got a good bath. I came back, dried overnight, and now we need to do a good wipe down on it. So wipe down is just to get rid of dust and particles of whatever happens to be on the surface. Now you can just use acetone. I have this prep all left over from another job I did, painting actually on the bus. And it works really well. That's what it's designed to do. Same basic thing as acetone. So I'm going to wipe it down with that. And once that's done, we will be painting with a 2-part primer to start off. It's an epoxy primer. So this is what we'll be using. Got a gallon of the primer and the curing agent, quart. And that'll go on in probably a minimum of 2 coats. They say to use 2 to 3. So we'll see how well that works. And that's next. Let's clean it up first. So now, I'm sure you've noticed at the beginning of all my videos, I have a little phrase that I use, which is something to the effect of, keep yourself, once you've retired, physically active and mentally engaged. Well, this falls, to me, under the category of staying mentally engaged. I'm not exceptionally experienced at 2-part epoxies, and never have I done a 2-part epoxy primer. So heck, I mean, it took me 10 minutes just to figure out how to cut these rings off the top of the cans. So I've spent a lot of time at the manufacturer's website learning how to do this, and I'm not going to bore you with all those specifics because that's something you can just go do on your own without being involved. So if you're really curious, go and look it up on their website. One thing I did find interesting is there's something called an induction time with this, where after you mix it, you have to wait for 15 minutes or maybe a little bit longer for it to cook, I suppose. And then it's ready to use. And then you have about a 2.5 hour window where you can't use it anymore. So if I make way too much, it'll go bad, and if I make way too little, well, then I can make another small batch, and that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. So we'll see how it works out. Here we go. All right, induction time is done. So I'm going to start off just painting in around these areas where the roller really won't reach well. You know, I'm doing a wipe in advance because I'm outside under the pole barn. At this point, I'm simply priming. It's going to get sanded in between a little bit anyway, so any little bit of dust that comes in is not going to bother me very much. When I go to paint, I'll probably actually paint in the garage. Seems to go on okay. This initial coat will be just a thin coat. In fact, all the coats will be thin coats. Well, I mixed up a little over half a quart, and it got me most of the way through just the bottom of the boat, and that's it. Not nearly as far along as I hoped it would do. But this is very satisfying. You're now seeing color come on the boat. The other thing you're finding is that all your little imperfections start to show up, and there are quite a few. Also, you'll notice that there's a bit of stippling, I guess you call it, to the paint. I used the correct roller, the one that they sent me. So I think what happens now is we put 3 coats on, then we sand it down smooth. And all of that will be gone. Turning out pretty good so far. And it's the following morning, and I have 2 coats of primer on the boat. I finished up yesterday afternoon around 4:30, 5 o'clock. Did a little extra reading, and it says it's okay to sand between coats. And so this morning, first thing, that's what I'm doing. I did have a fair amount of, I guess you call it stippling on the boat. I don't know how well you can see it in this yet. It's turning out pretty good. And it turns out, and I said yesterday that the roller I was using was the right one. It is one I ordered from them, but it turns out that it was not quite the right roller. I had ordered some more rollers that were correct, and those showed up yesterday afternoon after I'd done the first coat. So I rolled the second coat on yesterday, and it went on much smoother with a lot less of that stippling in place. So I'm going to go ahead and sand it off this morning down to pretty smooth, put the third coat on. They say to not wait more than about 16 hours because it gets really hard to remove. And this is not coming off easy, but it's not coming off as bad as I thought it would. So coat number 2 being sanded, coat number 3 will go on after. Wow, this stuff is hard. I'm using 220 grit like the instructions said, and it's just, I'm getting about 1.5 feet, and it's just down to nothing. There's no more cutting power left on it. So I've decided to switch back to 100 grit because there is a pretty heavily stippled, whatever it's called, anyway, bump surface on this. It needs to be cut off. So this cuts it a lot faster, but it leaves it pretty smooth. I'm not cutting down too far. I'm just getting it down to where it's smooth and the rough edge is gone, the rough part. Well, I'm about, I don't know, 6 or 7 days into this anyway. And here's where we are at the moment. 2 coats of primer and 1 coat of actual paint. I'm at the point right now where I'm sanding down the first coat of paint. You're really just kind of roughing it up. But let's talk about what I've learned so far. First, I've learned that I don't like working with 2-part epoxy primer. It's difficult from my perspective, to get it to go on well, and then to get it back off. Boy, when you're sanding it, if you've got imperfections, it's tough. It's a lot of work to get it sanded back down smooth. Now, what else have I learned? I've learned that when you're painting, you have several different ways to apply both primer and paint. You can roller it on, or you can brush it on. Well, I initially started brushing when I painted, and I found down this entire side, on this side, that it was just going on too thick. I couldn't get it to get thinner. When I thinned it a little bit, the amount of thickness that was there created a lot of runs along the side here going downhill. So when I went to the other side, I switched over to a roller, and that made a big difference. It went on a lot thinner. It didn't run nearly as badly. So on this side, where I'm having to just get rid of all these runs before I put the next coat of paint on, over there I'll just be able to mostly just scuff up and smooth a few imperfections off and put on the second coat of paint. Lot to learn. It's the way it is. Now, when I'm done here, yesterday when I was painting, I had a lot of trash coming in. There's a little light breeze that's bringing in little pieces of whatever on the wind. So I've been taking that out as I go. When I put the second coat on, which won't be the final coat, I don't think, I'll probably put on 3, but I'll clean this up real good, and then I'll take it into the garage where I don't have to worry about wind issues, and I'll paint inside the garage and keep all the little pieces of leaf and bugs out of it.
2 coats. Polyurethane paint. Looks really, really good. It'll get flipped over, the inside will be done. Probably 3 coats on the inside, and then flip back over again, and I'll put a 3rd coat on the bottom.
All right, so it looks like we've got the hull painted, 2 coats on the bottom, and we're about to flip this thing over and do the inside. But you know what? This seems like a good place to stop for today. I'm sure you have other things to do. You've probably been watching this for close to half an hour. And I, in turn, am getting ready for a fishing trip. Got the battery being charged, got my gear together, leaving first thing in the morning. So, thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. And please remember to like and share and subscribe. And I'll see you next time on Keeping Up with Papa, Life After Work.